Welcome to The Sports Bubble, a production of iHeartRadio and Treefort Media. My name is Jensen Karp, and you know what? F this. I'm recording this intro on Monday, July 27th, hours after the recent announcement that over a dozen Marlins players and staff have tested positive during the first weekend of official games. They're canceling matchups. The Phillies now have to quarantine because they were exposed. The dominoes have begun to fall. And not like the good dominoes where House of Highlights posted on their Instagram. It's like dominoes where they all fall at once and there's no bucket of water at the end. I'm nowhere near I told you so yet, but I hope everyone in professional sports is taking this serious because even though the NBA is pretending to be in a bubble, shouts to Lou Williams and rapper Jack Harlow, it's not working. And I want everyone to be safe more than I want to see a cutout of a dog sitting front row at Great American. And if baseball is to end this week, please name Jackie Bradley Jr. as MVP. He went 636 over the weekend. Anyway, I'm still talking to athletes and industry professionals to see what they're doing during this very weird time, because someone has to. This is The Sports Bubble with Jensen Karp. Even with baseball's future in jeopardy, NASCAR has been driving at full speed. Sure, they had a positive test once and had been at the forefront of racial tension, but they're still competing, taking advantage of the natural social distancing their events allow for drivers. And no one has taken advantage of these times more than Aric Almirola. While most of us have been staring out the window, paranoid and gaining weight during the pandemic, this dude has been streaking, putting together the most successful run of his career. Aric is currently 8th overall in the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series, his career best position. And in his 19 starts this season, he has 11 top 10 finishes, 5 top 5, and is the only driver in the field to have been inside the top 10 at every checkered flag. He even crossed the finish line backwards at the Geico 500 in 3rd place. That's insane. The Cuban Missile is taking advantage of a predicament where most of us feel our physical worst. Yet, he's one of the few in sports having the time of his life. And this weekend at Foxwoods, he'll attempt to keep the streak alive, maybe even with the W he's so intimately flirting with. We'll talk about why he's thriving in these times, why he sent a text to Bubba Wallace even though they aren't quote-unquote friends, and we get into bacon, which I'm sure you saw coming. Let's ride shotgun into the sports bubble.
Call from
Aric Almirola.
To accept, press 1.
Hello, Aric.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm well, man. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for having me.
First off, I know you have a lot of work on your mind nowadays, but for a very long time, you were homeschooling and keeping preteens busy. That was your entire schedule. So first, let's start with where you were quarantining and how you survived.
So we started the quarantine at home here in Mooresville, North Carolina, with a 7 and 7-year-old boy, and a 6-year-old daughter. So we spent a couple weeks here and found it to be extremely challenging to keep our kids from, wanting to play with the neighbor kids out in the cul-de-sac and on, in the street. And so we really took it seriously in the beginning. Like we were like, nope, we're staying home, we're staying indoors. And we found that to be an extreme challenge, especially when they were done with their schoolwork by, after lunch, 1, 2 o'clock. So we loaded up our RV and drove from North Carolina to Florida, and it was nice to have the RV. We didn't have to go inside any public restrooms or anything like that. We could have sandwiches and all of that while we traveled. And we went down to Florida. My in-laws lived down near the Naples area in Florida. And so we parked our RV next to their house and basically quarantined there for about 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was nice. We could manage who we came in contact with way better there, especially with the kids. And we could swim in the pool and go out on the boat and go in the ocean. And it was, there was a lot more entertainment there without coming in contact with a lot of other people.
I don't blame you. You have a 7 and 8-year-old. Those are both very high maintenance ages. Those, you can't just tell them to sit on their hands. That is way too hard.
Yeah. Trying to get them to do their schoolwork was hard enough. And by the time we got done with their schoolwork, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the last thing we wanted to do was continue to have to govern their every move. So it was nice to be down there and we could swim in the pool and goof off and have fun and actually just be outside. I think for us, that was the hard part about being at home in North Carolina. At that time in early March and early April, the weather was terrible. It was just rain after rain after rain and just cloudy, gray days. So going to Florida and being in the nice sunshine and being outdoors certainly helped our sanity.
Sure. Well, normally you'd be traveling around a ton for work during that time. You were grounded recently, so I want to know what's harder. Is it competing in NASCAR or homeschooling kids?
Homeschooling kids,
Oh,
hands
man.
down.
Jeez.
Yeah, that was the greatest eye opener for my wife and I. We drop our kids off at school and quite honestly don't really think about it. You appreciate, school and the teachers, but it's normal, right? It's what we all do. Anybody that has kids, like, you drop your kids off at school, you take for granted that they're, cared for and that they're learning something, and then you pick them up after school. And you don't really pay a whole lot of attention to what goes on in between. But when you are the one that's teaching them, you have a whole new appreciation for the teachers and the school. And I know that was the case for us. I know my wife and I are very, very meticulous, and we have very high expectations of our children. So trying to teach them and not having the patience that we probably need to be good teachers was something that we learned. We had to navigate that because, we wanted them to just get it. Come on, understand, what's so hard about this? And then we know our kids better than anybody else. So we know when they're trying to skate by or when they're giving their best effort. So we're probably even way harder on our own children than the teacher would be because we have such high expectations out of them.
Yeah, well, they are saints, those teachers. It's always shocking when they're not millionaires. You're like, this job deserves more than I make, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Obviously, a lot of people who just know NASCAR from afar assume you wake up and then go drive, which we all know is not the case. It takes a ton of endurance training. Working out's obviously involved. So how do you do that when you're in an RV and going to the in-laws? How did you use quarantine to stay in driving mode?
Well, fortunately for me, I enjoy a lot of outdoor activity for my training. It's something that I enjoy. And so I found that if I enjoy working out, it doesn't really feel like working out. So I enjoy running, and I really, really enjoy cycling. And so I took obviously running shoes with me, and I took a bike with me. And so I did a tremendous amount of cycling while I was down there, which was nice. I probably rode my bike 4 to 5 days a week and probably ran, 3 or 4 days a week. Some days, I'd get up in the morning and run super early while it was still not that hot out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would take off in the afternoon and go ride my bike for 30 or 40 miles for a couple hours in the heat of the day, which I felt like was going to really help me when I got back in the race car because, that heat training and endurance training at the same time is essentially what we're doing in the race car.
Yeah.
Our heart rates are on average of what a marathon runner's is for about the same amount of time, maybe a little longer. But the inside temperature of our race cars is about 130 degrees.
Oh.
So it's hard to train for that anywhere else but outside in the elements.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, people who hear you say that you love running, I mean, what, I mean, they're probably like rolling their eyes, but how do you make running enjoyable for you?
So I make running enjoyable for me by the fact that I don't, I'm not trying to set land speed records. So I'll go out and I'll run 3 to 5 miles. I don't run any more than that. I'm not trying to run a marathon or, an Ironman yet. Maybe I have aspirations of doing that when I'm not racing anymore, because it is going to take a lot of, time and sacrifice to do that. And I don't have the time right now. But for me, I love to run. I go run 3 to 5 miles, and I can start out at a, 10-minute pace, which is relatively slow for me. And then I can run 1 or 2 miles like that. And then I can, try and run 8-minute or 7:30 pace mile, and then slow it back down for another 9-minute mile to close it out. And it feels good. It doesn't hurt. And it's a great way to get a good workout in to start your day.
Well, I wanted to kick this off with, saying you're my first driver on the podcast. I've been so impressed with NASCAR. We had on Brianna Daniels, who was incredible. And after a stop down in March, you're now back in your cars racing. I think the sport itself has done a good job with getting you back into action. And I guess, what are the biggest difference you see in the sport now because of COVID-19? What are the changes that affect you the most?
For me personally, the biggest change that has affected me is just the lack of human connectivity. I'm very much a hands-on person just with the race car, but especially with people. Mm-hmm. I enjoy shaking people's hands. I enjoy patting, my team members on the back. I enjoy talking face to face with my crew guys and my team members and smiling and laughing and joking and having that human interaction. And for me, that has been the most challenging part is, flying to the racetracks alone, getting to the racetrack and being in my RV alone. And then when it's time to race, walk out to the race car alone, stand next to my race car for the national anthem alone, right. And then get in my race car and go race alone. And, all of my human interaction is through a telephone or a video screen or a computer. And it's not the same. I'm very, very much a person that enjoys being around people and especially my team. I love that camaraderie. And, I miss that.
Yeah. And dumb question, but do you notice the fans in the car? Like, it's a totally empty and quiet stadium right now. NASCAR's hinted to bringing some people back down the road, but do you notice any noise or anything when you're in the car, or is that sort of the same?
You notice the lack of fans when you walk out, to your car to start the race. There's just that lack of energy, that lack of electricity because you don't have, 100,000 fans in the stands and yelling or cheering or booing or any of those things. Mm-hmm. You're not walking through crowds to get to driver introductions, and you're not signing autographs and all of those things on pit road before the start of the race. Right. So that's very awkward. But once you strap in the race car to start the race, you don't really notice the lack of fans anymore. When we're all in the race car, we're so focused and concentrating on the competition around us on the racetrack, and then just focused on hitting your marks and racing the racetrack, that you don't really notice that there's no fans in the stands. The race cars are so loud inside. You can't really hear, even when fans are there, you can't hear them. But then when the race is over, that's the next awkward part, that there's no fans cheering or booing or any of those things when the race is over. And there's just an overall lack of energy, without the fans.
And, I know that they have sort of really drastically cut the number of personnel that's allowed on site during the race weekends. And like you said, you can't really stand next to your pit and your crew. I mean, have those configurations and guidelines negatively affected the job itself, other than just maybe your psyche about working?
No, I think for us, I can't speak for everybody, but I can only speak for myself. I grew up racing as a hobby. It was something that I did because I loved it, right? That's how everybody becomes a professional athlete. Like, they all started as a hobby. Doesn't matter if you're a baseball player or a football player or whatever. You do it for hobby, for sport. And then all of a sudden you get good enough, and then you grow up, and then next thing you know, you become a professional and you start getting paid to do it. So that is, essentially my story. And so I never did it for the fame. I never did it for the money. I've always done it just because I love to drive fast things, whether it's a go-kart or a race car or whatever it is. I love to race and compete against other people in machines, and I like to try and go faster than them and to pass them and to race with them. And so I missed that so much when we weren't racing, when we were shut down because of the pandemic. That was the one thing that I realized that I really miss. Like, I don't miss the money. I don't miss the fame. I don't miss any of those things, but I miss that adrenaline rush of driving the race car and competing.
Yeah, and how were you able to keep in touch with your crew? Was it just Zoom calls and stuff like that? Because they're so crucial to your prep and success.
Yeah, we used Zoom, and there's other forms of meetings, Teams and FaceTime, and depending on how many people were on the meeting. And we used every resource, and still to this day are continuing to use every resource available just to constantly stay engaged with each other.
And I asked this purely for one big reason, which is that you have somehow been able to take coronavirus and COVID and the stop down and all these changes to your sport, and you're having the best run of your career. Very odd time in history to decide to do that. But top five finishes in your last five races, 8 consecutive top tens. While most people have felt rusty and out of sorts, you are killing it. Why is that?
I just attest it always to people. I think that's the one thing that I think gets overlooked about most sports, but especially about ours. When you look on TV, or if we can ever have fans back, and you can look at the racetrack and you look at the cars, they all look very similar. Obviously they have different paint jobs and stuff like that, but in the grand scheme of things, they all look relatively the same, right? And we have rules that govern us to be equal, but they're not equal. And what makes the difference is the people that put the cars together, the attention to detail that they put into their specific job. Those are what make the biggest difference. And so, I've just been so fortunate and blessed to be with a great group of people. And, they make me look good.
Yeah, and I mean, even through these sort of challenging times, it's been awesome to see. And I guess too, with the way that the sport is going, with Jimmy Johnson testing positive for coronavirus last week, and then NASCAR announced just a few days ago that 2 negative tests, he'll be back racing. Listen, I'm not one to bust anyone here, but that hasn't sat right with me. It's only 2 tests, a couple days. I assumed he had to quarantine. I thought it was for 2 weeks. Do you know what NASCAR's rules are for that when there's a positive test, and how often are you guys being tested?
Yeah, so we are being tested to enter the racetrack. They run us through a testing station, and then we are admitted into the infield to our motorhomes and campers, and then we're ready for the race weekend, or the race that weekend. And then if we do test positive, we have to go to a secondary screening station to further evaluate what's going on. He had a positive test, and then so they've told him that he's got to have a negative test, 2 negative tests within 24 hours of each other. And so I guess he tested positive early of a week ago.
Yeah.
And then this Monday he had a negative test, and then Tuesday he also had a negative test. So, the doctors and CDC and state health officials all agree, and NASCAR has reinstated him. So I'm glad. I think that's probably the way it should be, personally. I think it's extremely detrimental to a guy that, would have no symptoms and have a positive test, and Lord only knows if it's a false positive.
Right.
There's no way to prove that. But you jeopardize not only somebody's season, but you jeopardize their career. I mean, you talk about missing 14 days if you test positive the day before an event. And it's a week where we're going to run a doubleheader race and a Wednesday race and a doubleheader the next week, like we're going to have coming up pretty soon. You could potentially miss 4 or 5 races. And if you miss 4 or 5 races, your season is over.
Yeah.
And then once the playoffs start, if you miss 1, your season's over. And so not only does that have an effect on your season, it has an effect on your career, and it has effect on you financially. So I think that, I think that NASCAR has got to do the best job that they can to navigate all of that.
Yeah, especially with it possibly being Jimmy's final season as well. And because of the stop down in NASCAR, the schedule has been adjusted. Like you said, ton of double headers, things like that. And one big thing, and I know we're all voting for Bacon to make it happen, which we'll get to a little bit later, is the July 15th All-Star race. They're letting in 30,000 fans. Obviously, they're going day by day to figure out if this is even humanly possible. But are you tepid? I'll be honest. I'm going to be your most pessimistic interviewer. I think we should be overly careful. I know a lot of you seem that way as well. But 30,000 fans to me sounds still like a lot of people, and I'm still nervous with numbers raising.
Yeah, I don't make the rules, man. I just go show up and go drive the race cars. So to be honest, I'm not even really going to comment on that because I don't have a dog in the fight. They're not going to come in contact with me. I'm not doing any fan engagements. I'm not going out shaking hands or signing autographs or kissing any babies. So
Sure.
From that standpoint, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I stay safe.
Sure.
And that's really all I can worry about.
After this, more with NASCAR driver Aric Almirola. Right now, Feeding America is working tirelessly to ensure our most vulnerable populations, like students who are out of school, the elderly, individuals whose jobs are impacted, and low-income families, continue to have access to food and other needed resources during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Feeding America Food Bank Network is committed to serving communities and people facing hunger in America, and their greatest need is donations and support of local food banks. This podcast is committed to donating a portion of the proceeds from the show to Feeding America, and we hope that you can join us in this effort too. Find out how you can help at feedingamerica.org/COVID-19. And now, the rest of my conversation with Stewart Haas Racing's Aric Almirola. Luckily, like I said, you've been on a streak and you had a wild finish at the Geico 500. Third place, you basically finished spun around backwards. You were like a real Ricky Bobby. Has that ever happened to you? And have you ever had to practice that?
No, I've never practiced that. But when I got home, my kids did tell me that I was like Tow Mater from the movie Cars, and that I'm the world's best backwards driver. So
you did kill it. I mean, it truly was remarkable. It made mainstream news, hit pop culture even outside of NASCAR. And I guess it's a Mario Kart move. I mean, it truly was like I've never seen it.
Yeah, well, I do have a fair amount of experience playing Mario Kart. My son loves Mario Kart, so that's one of the ways that we've spent some of our quarantine was playing Mario Kart. So I did have I did have a chance to brush up my skills on Mario Kart quite a bit before we went back racing.
Who do you pick? I'm just hoping you don't say Bowser. Do you have a regular racer?
Yeah, I'm Yoshi.
Okay, good. Very good pick. I like that. Good middle run speed.
Yoshi on a motorbike is tough to beat.
It is tough to beat. So beyond golf carts on Mario World, I've been impressed with NASCAR over the past few months. It started obviously with the banning of the Confederate flag at races and then the swift message they sent out regarding Bubba Wallace. I know he mentioned you specifically during a press conference as someone he's not necessarily pals with, but was so impressed and felt it was so important that you texted him, and he said it meant a lot, and you also publicly tweeted. But why was reaching out to him personally? Why was that important to you?
Well, for me, I just knew that he was going through a lot. And, I know when you feel like the world's crashing in around you and all those things, you can live in your head and you can just get in a bad place. And so I just messaged him and said, hey man, I can't imagine what you're going through. I don't even pretend to understand, but I have empathy for you, and I, care about you as a human being, and that I am going to stand with you and stand by you and support you as a brother. I know we're not friends. He's a very different personality than I am, and we don't. He's young and not married. I'm older, married, 2 kids. So our lives just don't, really coexist. And so, he's somebody that I see around a lot at the racetrack, but we just don't have a lot of interaction. But something inside of me was just saying, like, man, reach out to the guy. He's probably just dealing with so much, and I don't know how many people he has that reach out to him that just give him some encouragement. And so I just wanted to encourage him and tell him that I was thinking about him and caring about him as a person, as a human being. And I just feel like that's the right thing to do. I mean, for me, I'm a devout Christian, and I feel like that plays a huge part in my daily life and the way that I want to interact with people and treat other people. And for me, it was just something that I felt like I needed to do.
Yeah, and I think that as a casual NASCAR fan who's now getting much more into the community, I have loved it, seeing people like you and Tyler Reddick and Ty Dillon and the legend Richard Petty. I mean, seeing all of you guys stand up for each other as brothers, like you said, competitive but still brothers, has been really inspiring. Did you know that community existed before it was tested, on a national scale?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been around our sport for long enough now to know that we, as much as we want to crush each other on the racetrack, when we are away from the racetrack, we are a family. Like we are really a community. one of the things that I think that makes our sport unique to other sports is that every single team competes against each other every single weekend, right? There's no other sport like that where, it's either one team against another team, and then the next week they play a different team.
Right.
We compete against the same group of people and teams every single week. And when we travel to these events, we're all going to the same event together. We travel together. Our motorhomes are parked in a lot inside the racetrack together. So each one of those drivers, albeit I want to beat them on the racetrack, they're my neighbors at the racetrack.
Right.
Their motorhomes are right next to my motorhomes. The guys that have kids, their kids are playing with my kids on the playground. The wives, they're talking to each other. We sit outside on picnic tables by our motorhomes and eat dinner outside, together. So there's just a lot of community and a lot of family that goes into our sport.
Incredible. And lastly, you were part of the Drive for Diversity program that Bubba and Brianna Daniels was also part of, and it's really started to change the face of the sport incredibly. How important do you think that outreach is for NASCAR as they try to define themselves moving forward to a larger audience? Because as I like to point out, ratings have been up over the past few weeks.
Yeah, the ratings have been incredible. That's so fun and exciting to see. Of course, we want people to come back to the racetrack and experience it live and in person, which in my own opinion, which I'm biased, is the best way to experience our sport. But I think the diversity program and everything that NASCAR has initiated is so important for our sport. I mean, forever, NASCAR has been a quote-unquote all-American sport, and it's no secret that over the last 50-plus years, America has changed and changed drastically. And so for our sport to continue to be the all-American sport, we have to look like all of America, and I think that is so important, just, that ability to have more diversity and more inclusion and make sure that it doesn't matter what color your skin is or what language you speak or what you look like or whether you're, a man or a woman, whatever it is. If you have a passion for horsepower, cars that go fast, competition on a racetrack, seeing cars beat and bang running 200 miles an hour, we want you. We want you as a competitor. We want you as a fan. We want you as a mechanic. We want you as a race car driver. We want you. We want you to be included in our sport. And I think that's so important.
Well, I've loved watching it. So we talked about bacon a little bit. You are infamously sponsored by Smithfield Bacon, so much so that last week your car was wrapped with Vote for Bacon, which is something I think all of the nation can agree on, no matter what race or gender or religion. So I think it's the most delicious car wrap in the business, and we know how much people love getting creative with the pork product. So I wanted to play a game with you where I mentioned some bacon-flavored products, some recipes. They're all real. You will grade them on a 1 to 5 lap scale, 5 laps being the best. You tell me, I'm going to give them to you. They're all real.
Do it.
Okay. Bacon peanut brittle. This is meaty, smoky bacon chopped up, then tossed in with peanuts and spices, and then kind of mixed in with maple syrup.
Love it.
Great.
That's a 5.
5 laps. Perfect. Bacon brownies. Okay. This is a recipe I found on the internet. It's basically just as it sounds. Delicious brownie, bacon pieces cooked into the middle, sweet and savory.
My wife makes those, and I love them. So I'm giving those a 5.
All right. I'm seeing a pattern. Let's move on. This one is a little more controversial. This is bacon sushi. This is a real niche item, but it is real. Instead of wrapping a hand roll in seaweed, we wrap it in bacon.
Ooh, for me, I love sushi, and so this one's hard for me to grade because it would be very, very dependent on the fish.
Right.
So if it's shrimp or like yellowtail or something like that, like a light fish, I think I'm totally in. But like a piece of tuna,
right?
I don't know. Salmon, yes. So I'm going to go with a 3.
Yep. 3 laps right in the middle, dependent on what is inside. Very good answer. Double-decker mac and cheese stuffed bacon taco. Now, it is a lot to take in. It's not just bacon in the taco. This is a taco filled with mac and cheese, lettuce, and also shredded cheese, because, boy, they need to make sure they have their cheese there. The taco shell, though, is not made out of any sort of dough, or it is fully made of bacon. You're holding a bacon shell. There is a taco inside of it. What do you think?
Oh man. So that one's going to take about 5 miles of running before and about 60 miles of bike riding after, but I'm still going to give it, I'm going to give it a 4.
Okay, very good. Lastly, our last one, chocolate dipped bacon roses. Now, you brought up your wife. This could be for Valentine's Day or a date night, whatever you feel romantic. It is a slice of bacon swirled up nicely to look like a flower, kind of like what a hotel will do with your towel on your bed. You top those off with chocolate, you put them in a box, and voila, it is true love. Where are we on this?
That's a 5, hands down. I love chocolate and I love bacon, and I love chocolate and bacon together.
Absolutely. Well, you got me voting for bacon. Love seeing the streak you're on during a very hard time. I think it's kind of awesome to see someone flourishing in it, and we'll be rooting for you on the track.
All right. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
The Sports Bubble is produced and distributed by Treefort Media. The show is executive produced by Kelly Garner, Lisa Ammerman, Matthew Kugler, and me, Jensen Karp. Tom Monahan is our senior audio engineer and sound supervisor, with production and editing by Jasper Leak. Additional production help from Tim Schauer, June Rosen, and Haley Mandelberg. Our theme music is composed by Spilkus. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please subscribe, rate us, and review us on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please visit feedingamerica.org. If you're able to make a donation, any amount makes a difference, and you can learn more about other ways you can help on their website. For more information on the Sports Bubble, links to the socials, and for show transcripts for our hearing impaired listeners, go to treefort.fm. Be safe and be well. The Sports Bubble is a production of iHeartRadio and Treefort Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.